The Square Ball Podcast.
Welcome to the West Stand. My name's Dan Moylan. Michael Normanson is with me today.
All right.
I am all right because I'm looking forward to our trip to New Orleans. Do you know why? Because I've got an eSIM installed on my phone.
That's going to be the main bit.
That's what it's all about. So I'm looking forward to trying out my here's a Saley eSIM because I got 3 gigabytes free with my NordVPN plan, right?
Nice.
Which is nice, isn't it? Because Saley.com is from the people who made NordVPN. It's an eSIM product, which means you've got data wherever you go. So I've got my normal eSIM in there for my normal UK network, turning off my data, put my Saley one on, turn my data on that. That's how it works. Imagine a world where you can do that.
Is that complicated to do?
Dead easy.
Oh, okay, that's a relief.
Yeah. And if your phone's not compatible and you've gone, oh no, my phone's not compatible, 30-day money back guarantee, no questions answered. 24/7 support as well within the app. Have a look on the App Store. That's exciting, isn't it?
I think that's the best news I've heard all week.
It probably is.
which is sincerely true.
Given the topic of today's show. Yeah, you will get an eSIM. It provides an internet connection wherever you travel, saves you money on roaming fees as well. Because I've looked at my network's roaming fees for going to America. How much?
Yeah, over $5 a day on mine. I checked.
Yeah, it's coming up for £8 a day on mine. That's not happening. So I've got my Saley eSIM is in there and me 3 gig of data, and we'll be sorted, won't we? Me and you, Michael. Very nice. Get yourself to your App Store. It's on Apple and Android. It means you don't have to faff about getting SIM cards when you land or buying one off a bloke outside the airport. That kind of jazz, you know?
Am I allowed to chat to other men outside the airport?
Mate, what you do in your spare time is entirely up to you. But if you use the Square Ball at checkout, you get an exclusive 15% discount on a Saley eSIM data plan. And if you're on YouTube, have a look for the QR code that's on screen now. And you will also find the link in the episode description box. Today's guest, then, from The Athletic, straight from Ellen Road, no less, Beren Cross. What a few days it's been. Transfer window is closed. So just to timestamp all this, you have been speaking to the club this afternoon, Tuesday afternoon, inside Ellen Road for a good couple of hours, getting an understanding, a good handle on what's happened in the transfer window, because there is, should we say, a fair bit of unhappiness as what's happened in the final hours of the window. What can you share with us from this then? What's the explanation? How can we mollify the crowd, or how can the club help to try and mollify the crowd or make people understand what's happened? Because to my eyes, it looked like a bit of a shit show towards the end.
Well, hello, nice to see you both.
Yeah.
Please, the window's over now.
Just remember, don't take any of this personally, Beren.
It's fine.
Phil used to love the transfer window.
We will shoot the messenger, and that is you.
Well, yeah, deadline day wasn't good, definitely. I think the way that they are phrasing it, as people will be able to read, by the time people are listening to this.
Where can they read it?
The Athletic, of course,
yeah,
among other good outlets. So Robbie Evans's quotes will be out there, so it's going to be there. It's going to be very clear, and people can read it and digest it at their own pace with full context for what's gone on. So I'll try and remember what's been said in the sort of haze of the last few hours.
Because you've come in looking a little bit frazzled from 2 hours of chat about this stuff, and now you've got to recount it.
Consume all. Yeah, I think that the way they phrased it was a bad day, but a good window.
Right.
I think they acknowledge, Harry Wilson was who they wanted on Monday, deadline day. Didn't get him for whatever reason, whether that was Fulham being distracted by their quantity of incomings, which of course is their priority, or or whether the negotiations went in another direction. Ultimately, we've had Leeds' side to this. I know that in our reporting on the Athletic on Monday night after deadline day, Leeds were saying they were in a deal sheet scenario for Wilson and had received encouragement from Fulham that if Leeds put a deal sheet in with their signature, that Fulham would put theirs on, and then they get the extra 2 hours, don't they, to kind of get it all done. Fulham's perspective was that at some point between mid-afternoon and 7 o'clock, they told Leeds he was no longer for sale. So it's he said, she said. Ultimately, there's 2 sides of the story there.
Given he wasn't sold, I think Fulham were right. I think he wasn't for sale.
Clearly, the deal didn't happen.
Well, I was going to say, and also there was the story emerged about a very late in the day inquiry about 5 p.m. for Gus Hamer as well. So have Leeds then swung round to the other target?
So Hamer is that was certainly something that was knocking around, and as we are recording, still trying to stand that up. So by the time people are listening to this, they may well have known what's in our reporting on that. But Hamer is definitely one that we're checking out, and was something happening in and around those sort of latter hours of the window. But as I say, hopefully it will all come out in the wash, and by the time that people are listening to this, it will become clear on at least on our site. So yeah, a bit of a mess really. I think I reflected that on X on Monday night. It does feel like a bit of a mess, and ultimately, if the 10 they've got aren't enough to bridge the gap, Farke's going to answer for it with his job.
It won't be the people who didn't deliver the players, will it?
No, I mean, never say never, but it's quite rare to say, the manager can keep his job, but we're going to sack our managing director and our sporting director because of the performance in the window. So generally speaking, the manager goes first. And then if Leeds, God forbid, do get relegated, then, I think next May, the hierarchy knows exactly where the fingers of blame are going to be pointed.
I mean, the trouble I have with the idea of bad day at the end of a good window is I don't disagree. If I had to rank the window, I'd probably say a solid 7 out of 10 for the first half, but then like a 2 out of 10 for the second half of it. So I guess the overall score comes out somewhere in the middle. The failings of the latter part of the window have exposed the strategy at the start of the window as well, and the fact that the difference makers weren't recruited. They got defence and midfield sorted, which might have been a deliberate thing, maybe not, whatever it may be. So there's that. The other thing is, it feels like far too often Leeds United is ready to pat itself on the back for half a job done, because that's what it feels like, I think, to a lot of fans, that the job was not completed. Daniel Farke laid down the criteria. He wanted 2 more. He said it weeks ago. He said it around the Milan game in Ireland, and it went on and on and on. So I think people will have very little sympathy for the position that it was a bad day. They had time to address it, but they left the homework till the last minute.
I think that's the thing with the Wilson deal. You can cite your difficulties and things, but the transfer window has been open for a long time. We've been promoted for a long time. So when you're trying to get a bit of paperwork in, and you're blaming that for the deal not going through,
it rings hollow, doesn't it?
It's like, well, yeah. What did you expect? It's like the people who turn up late to an airport and then are livid they can't get on their flight. It's like, well, it's kind of, what do you expect? You're leaving yourself with no margin for error, aren't you, when you try and do something in the very last moments of the window.
And the chairman has said previously how ready they were, how much we've been planning this for 6 months, and yet you still left it to the last push-up. I appreciate, Beren, that you cannot force the market. You can't make, if you want to get Harry Wilson, you can't force Fulham to sell or loan you Harry Wilson any sooner than they're ready to. But it feels like there is a lesson in there. Don't talk up how ready you are if you then go on to underdeliver.
Don't put yourselves in a position where you need to get somebody on deadline day. I mean, ideally, they wouldn't have wanted to be in that situation yesterday. And I think I agree completely. It's been a window of 2 halves, and we'll reflect this. And we've got a piece going out on what will be Tuesday today, isn't it? It's a Wednesday morning, which virtually up until when Perry came in, there was 7 signings by July 26th. That's a really, really good start. You've got some solid starters in there. You spent a fair bit of money, and you've given yourselves more than 5 weeks to go and get those final few attackers that we all knew they needed. And ultimately, you and I were in here discussing Pajau way back when, and ultimately it felt like they never really recovered from that. It felt like the disappointment of missing out on that 30 million plus player. It just feels like I think it was 20 days between Perry signing and Calvert-Lewin signing. That's nearly 3 weeks of mulling over and trying to work out where you go next.
It's a quarter of the window or thereabouts. I think it's an 11-week window or thereabouts, something like that. Am I right? Might be.
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah.
And ultimately, Muniz, again, that is another one where I'm sure, ironically, we didn't actually ask them whether they would do anything differently with Muniz. But certainly from my observation, that was allowed to drag out for far too long. I mean, we discussed it on several podcasts how that was clearly the main target they wanted. No problem with them making him the main target, but that just, it lasted months and months and months, didn't it? And ultimately, they pivoted to Calvert-Lewin. Which, regardless of how you feel, how I feel about Calvert-Lewin, they're really happy about Calvert-Lewin. They think that if they can keep him fit, a la Firpo and Byram, they're back in the medical department. This will all be out there on Wednesday afternoon. They are confident that their medical department and the medicals they did, the surgeons they consulted, that they can keep Metchett and Calvert-Lewin fit enough to provide the games needed and the goals needed to be difference makers. So we'll see. I know that my gut reaction when Calvert-Lewin signed was not positive. It didn't feel like equitable with Muniz and what that entailed. It did feel like you're picking up the broken toy that is on the free market. Again, Leeds can speak for themselves, but ultimately they feel that's a good deal. A free agent, well remunerated. He'll be on a very, very good salary. Then they're not ignoring that fact. It's a major financial outlay for him over the length of his contract. But they feel there is enough pros basically to outweigh the cons with Metra and Calvert-Lewin if we're focusing on those two in particular.
And there's Okafor as well, though. So half your front line comes with a sketchy injury record. So, I mean, I think there's been a lot of social media noise. There's a lot of noise on Wacko, like the chat forum, a lot of anger, a lot of passionate language. All of it comes down to the question, really, have we done enough to give ourselves the best chance of staying in this division? And I think universally, the fan base feels not, and that manifests itself in the form of this anger. But it's an anxiety about being able to stay in the division. And I think it's an entirely fair response, even if the language isn't always proportionate. It's understandable.
Especially when you look at the first 4 games, in all competitions, you look at the XG produced and you then don't add to the attack after Okafor. You look at Everton was just before Okafor, but you look at the 3 games after Okafor signed, and yes, they tried, but they didn't add to the attack ultimately. And that is a major question mark for me still, having heard their explanation. They wanted Wilson, they didn't get him. They wanted Buonanotte, they didn't get him. Only time's going to tell now. It's going to be told in the matches, isn't it?
And we had Farke post Newcastle saying,
yeah,
we need attackers. And we had Morata on Sky ahead of the opener saying, lots of stuff happens late in the window.
The final days of the window.
And actually what happened was we got a reserve fullback in, and that's been it. And that's surely not what he meant when he said that.
No, absolutely. Well, and again, they will say that in an ideal world, they would have got Buonanotte and they never would have been in a position on deadline day needing to get Wilson. So the hierarchy will say, we agree with Daniel, we wanted the attacker and ultimately weren't able to land it. So they would say they agree with Farke and ultimately didn't get it done. It
was a failure then by their own admission. It's a failure. But there's 2 things. We'll get on to Buonanotte in a second. So I was just going to mention it, funnily enough, Michael, but you got there first. The message that Morata put out around the Everton game, active till the final days of the window. And where Leeds United don't help themselves as well, I want to rewind 12 months to the signing of Solomon and the language that was used to announce that, it was completely unnecessary, but they were so sensitive to the criticism of where the signings, and because we left it till late in the window to get Solomon. That was that deadline day or thereabouts.
I was on honeymoon, but right. It was late on, from what I remember. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, beating off competition from a number of top-flight sides across Europe for his signature. The deliberate strategy of remaining patient in the transfer window has paid dividends, with the club able to act quickly to secure the services of a player who only became available in recent days. It's quite antagonistic. Considering we're all on the same side, that's quite antagonistic, isn't it? And then you fast forward 12 months and you look ridiculous in light of that. So don't be butthurt by a little bit of online criticism and noise. You've surely got to shut that out to an extent.
Yeah, I mean, unless the club puts out some sort of formal statement addressing how upset they are. I mean, I don't know if they are upset with the disquiet. I'm sure they're well aware, and fans are justified to be upset with how deadline day is going and how the final week has gone, because they haven't delivered the attackers they need. I think when I looked at, in terms of the players that played significant minutes last season, I think they've effectively traded Joseph, Ramazani and Solomon for Okafor, Calvert-Lewin and Metra. That is the sum total of what has changed in that front line, aside from Harrison for Bamford. But that doesn't feel like a massive upgrade to me. I mean, Clearly we're all hoping that they're right and we're wrong to criticise them, and it will be right, and those players will deliver their goals, and it'll be a riotous season. But as it stands right now, it does feel like they're short in attack. And on the question of timing and not waiting late in the window, that was a big point they made off the back of promotion was, whereas in the Championship and you're waiting for the scraps from the Premier League, there may well be some logic to waiting late in August because, like I say, you're waiting for those scraps. But as a Premier League team, you're high up the food chain and need to act sooner and need to have those players in the door sooner for integration and stuff. And again, they made the point, 7 new signings in before the end of the Germany camp. They're at the risk of patting themselves on the back for half a job done. In the cold light of day, 7 signings before the end of the training camp. That's pretty good in terms of quantity. But again, and I don't think any of us are criticising the defensive or midfield reinforcements, or even Perry in goal. I think it's going to come down to the attackers and whether or not they're going to score the goals, or even stay fit to be on the pitch to score the goals.
All right, then let's look at it a slightly different way then, and that's the PSR angle on this, which I know you've spoken about with them at some length this afternoon, and the finances. Is it correct that they had, give or take, about 100 million to spend to stay within PSR limits without sales? That's a figure I've heard bandied around. So they're in that ballpark now, I would imagine. So if you know that's your limit, then don't you look at where you are going to spend that money? And as you just pointed out, Michael, what we got in the later part of the window is it was James Justin, but 8+2. So best part of 10 million. I think under 10 million quid there has gone on a backup defender to all intents and purposes, on top of Barnow, who was 5 earlier in the window. And it feels like there's been very little done ahead of that. There's been barely anything really relative to the overall expenditure spent in terms of transfer fees anyway. And like you say, Calvert-Lewin comes with a salary expense, which probably offsets a bit of a transfer fee.
Yeah.
Fair enough, understand that. But there's nothing has gone into that forward line, really, relatively speaking, which is, you would argue that the difference makers are the ones that are going to keep you up.
Yeah.
So don't you, knowing that you've got this limit, this figure,
pot of money.
Yeah. Don't you have to spend it a little bit more judiciously and spread it across the squad and target forward areas? Or do they believe that the defence is the thing that's going to keep them up?
That may well be it, Dan. I mean, they may well think that if you, as a need promoted club, I think we're all quite realistic in saying that Leeds can't have a dream window as a need promoted club. There are going to need to be concessions made in some parts. You can't go and spend £400 million. So if you, like you say, Robbie, for what it's worth, Robbie didn't say we had 100 million spend, but I suppose based on what they've done, that seems about, if Robbie has said they've maxed out, a lot of fans will have expected that line.
So he said that.
Yeah, he said
they did spend every penny.
Yeah, as far as they are concerned, on the record, they have spent every penny. And we can get into the explanations of the 60 million for Muniz and Pajal. But in terms of your question about spreading the money around, I agree. In theory, you should spend the biggest proportion of your budget on the hardest thing to do, which is to score goals. And again, Calvert-Lewin will be on a good salary. Okafor was, £18 million, there or thereabouts. And obviously Metch was free on a 2-year deal. So the outlay on him isn't particularly exaggerated either. So having said that, if we look at the cold light of day, they've not invested a huge amount in the attack. So the assumption is that they clearly then feel that the difference is going to be made in midfield and defence and in goal, where they have spent a big proportion of their money. We have to, that's clearly what they've done.
Mm-hmm. Was the issue of Ramazani spoken about in particular?
Yeah.
Because I think that's the other factor that's played into this week, that everyone assumed he was going because there was a plan to bring someone else in. And as it turned out, we just seem to have weakened ourselves
he was on the books.
Yeah, we've weakened ourselves for the saving of a salary and a bit of a loan fee. And I don't think, if you ask the majority of people if they would have accepted that without anyone else coming in, they would have said, well, just keep him. And even to an extent, you would say, well, keep Bamford. If we're not going to bring anyone else in, it's better to have him here than not, isn't it? At least it's someone who might be fit. If we've got an attack that is pretty injury prone. Yeah. And I know Bamford is probably the worst of those for that, but he's another body in there, isn't he? And if you're not going to replace him and you're going to pay him off anyway, just keep him.
He comes at a cost, doesn't he? Yeah. Anyway, regardless.
I think the rationale for Ramazani was that, and I need to think about who they've got. So they've got James Nonto, Okafor, Harrison, Aronson. And am I missing anybody that can play in the wide positions? 5?
Yeah, that's about right. Yeah.
So I think there again, this comes out to pecking order, doesn't it? Because I think a lot of us would probably play Ramazani ahead of Aronson and Harrison. But clearly, if Farker has got his reasons, Ramazani didn't play very much last season. Again, to some criticism from the fan base. But I think their rationale on this occasion is that ultimately he was going to be the 6th choice winger, and unless you are having a injury catastrophe, he probably isn't going to play very much. And again, I need to do the numbers on the 25-man squad list. I don't know how tight that is or whether he would have fitted into it.
I think we're at 24 now or thereabouts without checking.
I think part of the justification for him going was that it creates a space.
Right. Yeah, I need to check on the actual numbers of that. But ultimately, he would have, whether fans like it or not, it sounds like he just wouldn't have played very often. And as we saw at the Arsenal game, didn't even make the matchday squad, did he? So their rationale is it's better for him to go out at the age of 25, play football in the Liga where he knows he's done pretty well in the past with a coach they know in Carlos Corberán. And we all hope, a bit like with Joseph, he has an amazing season over there, bulks his value up. There's no option for them to buy him. And he comes in next summer and then they reassess the situation. So their rationale, I think, is he simply wasn't going to play. So why keep him here if he's not going to play? This
speaks to another issue, though, doesn't it? Which is about the players they've opted to retain. And I can't, I know he's been folded back in, but I can't imagine there was a huge appetite, perhaps even on Jack Harrison's part, but on the club as well, to fold him back in. That I think they would have preferred to have moved him on. And I suspect probably deep down he would have too. The ability to trade, it feels like we've not traded very well. And by trading, I mean the selling aspect of it.
Yeah.
We've had a number move out, but no real income come from it. And you know, none of us want to see Pascal Struijk or Willy Gnonto sold. You know, it's always sad when you see the players go, but you can also make a case for it, because I think we all understand that there is a PSR imperative, and you know, there's a sum that you've got to stay within. If you do sell one of these assets, it then opens the door to a lot more expenditure, and they've just failed to do it. And it's not necessarily about cashing in on those players that are worth quite a bit from PSR. It's also the peripheral ones as well. Like Joseph has basically gone out at no cost. Bamford's a net cost.
Mellier's still here.
As well on a massive salary. What does that say about their trading abilities? Because that's as much a part of the job as buying, surely.
Yeah, selling's definitely been one of the oversights and one of the failings, if you want to call it that, over the window. And they haven't sold or churned the squad in the way people chuck out the example of Nottingham Forest a few years ago, where they churned the squad aggressively in that first window. Broke the rules, I think, in the process and got the points deduction off the back of that window, perhaps. But no, yeah, I think most people would accept the selling of crowd favourites like Pascal or Willy, God forbid, Ayo Tanaka, if it meant you brought in proper Premier League difference makers.
Steady now.
Maybe not Tanaka. But you know what I mean? As you say, like the PSR ones that have come in very low value, and you can generate a profit off.
Just being tongue-in-cheek. Try to lighten the mood, Beren. It's all got quite heavy.
And presumably we'd get 130 million from him as well.
Higher than Isaac. Easy.
It seems like they didn't think the juice was worth the squeeze, effectively.
Right.
And in that, yes, they probably could have found a market and generated profits for Gnonto, Struijk. Let's not say Tanaka again, but those two other players who can generate, have got a market with low PSR, on book value. Thank you. But they just, again, and there was a lot of anger about this at the time. When we dealt with the Pajau fallout, the key point they made was they felt that on the current market of the wingers better than James, Gnonto, Harrison, they were not available to Leeds. I've phrased that badly, I think, but there were clearly a lot of wingers in world football better than what Leeds have got, but a very, very small proportion, in Leeds' view, were not available to them. So ultimately, you can move those players on, damage the continuity of the squad. Again, watchword, buzzword, whatever you want to call it. But they clearly didn't feel those stretch targets, difference makers were out there to kind of justify the payoff of that in terms of maximising the effort of selling those players.
Right.
So we've not talked about the Muniz and Pajau thing yet, but as everybody knows by now, they had allocated more than £60-odd million to bring both of those players in, and they wanted to do that.
That's a big fat chunk of change if your limit is 100.
Exactly, a lot of money. And now, and again, as people will read, their rationale was, if those two players had come in, the rest of the window would have looked significantly different to how it is now played out, in that, yes, you would have lost. They weren't saying these players would have definitely gone, but they were trying to give examples. So without holding them to it, but you're looking at your Struijks, your Gnontos, your Tanakas, maybe
the ones where all the value existed.
Exactly. Yeah. Risk of repeating myself. They would have had to go for as good a profit as possible to make space in the PSR calculations for big players like Muniz and Pajau, and maybe your fringier players, which people might not care about, but your Justins. I don't know about your Bornals. Bornal came earlier in the window, but your depth reinforcements wouldn't. Obviously, Okafor and Calvert-Lewin wouldn't have happened in that scenario either. So, in terms of people saying, "Well, where's all the money gone?" Leeds are saying we would have generated that, we would have paid that much money, but we would have had to then generate it via sales of players who are now still here and are continuing, and are players that Daniel Farke values.
Like a new signing.
No, you said it, Daniel.
Do you know what I mean? But this is the problem, Beren, right? We've heard it all before. And I think, while I understand the logic of it, it's a passionate business, isn't it? That our relationship is one of passion, and it's not of logic. So when you kind of run up against it and you push up against it like this, it's annoying, particularly when you sold something of a dream by the higher ups, when they're saying things on TV. We'll be doing this. We want to give Daniel Farke the chance to succeed in the Premier League that he didn't have before under Norwich. And then he said very publicly numerous times, and then most recently, most definitively against Newcastle, we will struggle to stay up if we don't add attacking reinforcements. And they have failed to do that. So overall, it doesn't look great, does it, when that unfolds in that way?
Given the inability to move players on as well, it does make me wonder what sort of a panic we would currently be in if Fulham had said, all right, yeah, you can have them for 40 million quid. We'd have had to sell some people, and would we have actually been able to do it? And you sell them not from a position of strength, I guess, as well. If people are like, we know they desperately need to claw back 40 million quid here.
Well, I mean, hypothetically, I guess it may well have been quite easy to sell those players, but they just, in the timeline that we're on, the real timeline, they didn't need to sell those players or didn't want to sell those players. So I guess we can't say they would have struggled to sell them. Yeah. I guess if they...
We're dealing in hypotheticals, aren't we? Yeah.
But I suppose the players that you would presume they would have been, for example, desperate to move on Meslier.
Meslier, Bamford.
Probably happy to, and Bamford, probably happy to move on Harrison or Aronson.
Yeah.
Because they're, I would say, quite replaceable. And we've not really done it. Getting some money for Greenwood was about the best bit of...
They've not done it with any of them.
It's about the only bit of reasonable business we've done this summer in terms of outgoings.
I suppose they would argue that there is a very different market for Patrick Bamford and Illan Meslier to what there is for a striker, Gnonto, a Tanaka, young players who have had some very, very good seasons. Bamford's had several years of very difficult injury issues. Metcha's played less than Bamford, and Leeds got him for free on a 2-year deal. I mean, is that affecting where Bamford's stock is at now? He is literally a free agent. I mean, is that where a player like that, is that how a player like that is able to get a move now, in that there simply wasn't a market? Farke made it clear after the Manchester United game that Bamford was not a part of his plan. So Bamford's had, 6 to 8 weeks, is it, to find a move, and it hasn't materialised. Leeds were not going to stand in his way. So that Leeds can't magic up the transfer interest in Bamford. And with Meslier, it sounds like even yesterday that there was some interest in there. But it sounds like it may well have been Mellier's choice not to pursue. We don't know who the clubs were. We don't know what the situations were, but ultimately it hasn't happened.
Right. So he's just happy basically just to sit and ride out the last...
It's amazing to me. That did stagger me when they said that.
Because I suppose in January he's able to then talk to clubs, and if you go on a free, you then get a big signing-on fee, don't you?
He could sign a pre-contract in January, couldn't he? I mean, is the Saudi window still open?
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some foreign windows that still open. Maybe he gets a move. But as it stands, he's staying put as 4th choice goalkeeper.
Yeah, you're talking sort of Turkey, Saudi... Eastern Europe, I think windows are still open, aren't they? Yeah. For a bit, but
possible.
I don't know. That's only anecdotally from what I saw yesterday. But yeah, that's a fairly poor show, in that you've said to someone, you're not going to be playing, your career here, to all intents and purposes, is over, and there is absolutely no appetite on the player's part to go do something about that. So far,
we haven't had a chance to speak to Illan, so we can't really speak for him. But that's the club's position. And again, this I think was on the record. I think the club's position on Illan was that there was interest, but ultimately either he didn't want it or the options on the table didn't suit him.
Right. So it feels to me like, whether I'm being fair or not, a failure in trading. I don't know about you.
I mean, we've known we need to get rid of Meslier since he was dropped at the end of last season, haven't we?
Yeah, Swansea game.
He is, as much as you can say, as we've known we were promoted early. We knew Meslier was on his way out then.
Done, yeah.
So you would think his agent, the player himself, us, you'd think there'd be a willingness from everyone to just get that done somehow, wouldn't you? Even if it entails us picking up, half of his salary or whatever for the year, he needs to go out and play.
Yeah,
you would think,
or maybe not. Maybe we're misunderstanding how footballers think. Maybe.
Well, I suppose there are strange things happen in windows, aren't there? Like Buonanotte being one, where you kind of go, Leeds would have been a better move for you there.
Absolutely.
Surely.
Makes no sense at all, does it?
Yeah, and I think I spoke to Robbie Evans briefly on Saturday at the game. I said they were just kind of almost confused by that decision from Buonanotte. It does seem quite nonsensical, really.
Completely. I mean, he's going to go there. Did they confirm Garnacho the day before or the day after or something? I mean,
And then Enciso as well. all
Yeah,
that
you go in
weird.
there and you're just not going to play. So if you're going on loan somewhere, and it's a straight loan, it's not even like Chelsea have promised to spend tens of millions on an obligation next summer to make it worth Brighton's worth their while. Buonannotti's not going to earn any more money by going there. It's going to be effectively his Brighton terms still. So it doesn't make sense from a financial or a playing sense. I mean, he can't be so scarred by his Leicester experience that he didn't want to come to a newly promoted club again. I mean, when you see what Ellen Road offers and the atmosphere and that Everton game, like I say, even the Everton game, the most recent home win, that should be enough to convince him. And Leeds, they had a flight booked, a medical was booked. They clearly had convinced him that Leeds was the best place for him, but ultimately, Leeds cannot stop Chelsea from coming in at the 11th hour and gazumping them.
To go back to the PSR stuff for a minute.
Yeah.
If they are saying they're fully maxed out on this, but we were still trying to get someone in, so there's clearly a bit of money.
Yeah, this point was raised. So we said, well, you said you're maxed out, but you were trying to get Wilson, which would have been for, I think, anecdotally, between 7 and 10 million, I think was the number stuck around. That's not been verified. And I think the response then was the accounting period is obviously still open till June 30th next year.
Yep.
So we're back in that. Again, and this was one of the narratives early in the summer around Muniz and Pajal. There is still that room, either in January or in that period between the season finishing and the accounting period finishing, of getting a sale there. A bit like with how they did with Archie Gray.
We've still got a Gray on the
before
books
the end of June. Oh, don't go down that. Don't go down that road. That is beyond the pale.
I think a lot of this, talking about that frustration and that anxiety, is when you see what everybody else is doing, exchanging players and
the
huge inflated fees, selling things to themselves, trading with their own sister club in France. Are we being too well behaved here in a game that is completely corrupt and not well behaved?
Or are we being well behaved because we also have spent all the money? Is the other thing. Have they raised investment to go up to this limit?
I don't know about you, but
beyond?
Thorpe Arch looks ripe for sponsorship for me.
I know, but you still actually need the money to be somewhere. You can, because for all of the fact that Chelsea are buying things that are and selling things that are maybe not of true value, there is money somewhere for it to come, for this to be generated.
Well, we're suggesting that the people, the investors, the investment group, Red Bull, don't have money.
Well, they may not want to invest it.
Well, in which case, then does PSR become something actually of a convenient crutch for the ownership? Because actually, we looked at this, we knew we had 100 million to spend in this window. Beyond that, you're going to have to generate your own funds. Well, we won't ask for any more, then we'll spend that, and that's the limit. Is there actually a willingness to go in there and push the boat out?
I mean, we are still talking about huge amounts of money and loads invested over multiple years now. And I'm aware to some people it will seem like ungrateful almost to be like, well, I know you've put in all this money, but it's not enough, is it?
No, it's not. But they also choose to buy this thing,
and it is the game.
Yeah, and you don't buy it in a sterile market. You buy it against 19 other competitors. So when you get to the Premier League, you need to be able to compete. They, I'm sure, would argue that the net spend of just over £100 million within that ballpark. It's in the top 10 in the division. It's more than a lot of teams. Obviously, it's not even going near what like Arsenal and Liverpool and Man United have sort of regularly done. Sunderland, with a bit more additional PSR headroom, have kind of come in. But we are fairly right up there. But it does speak to how bad the game generally has become in terms of competitiveness, that we're looking at 100 million net spend and we still feel a bit disgruntled because it's not quite gone how we wanted.
They know that the game is fixed against newly promoted teams. So we've all done the maths. We all know how it works out, and ultimately the Premier League establishment want to make it as difficult as possible for every newly promoted team to come up and stay up. And obviously, the longer you stay up, the easier it gets, and the more money you can spend. So the club knows that the odds are stacked against them. Again, I don't see the accounts. I'm not privy to every single microtransaction they do. But again, Robbie is saying on the record, we have tried to creatively construct contracts in a way that does maximize every penny for them. When you speak, you've been in his company. When you speak to him and he does get into his numbers and things, it clearly is his bag. He's all about the numbers and the data. That's his. He's not. He himself would say he's not a football man. He's not an experienced soccer, in his word, administrator. But he is. He's backing himself again publicly on the record and saying that we have pushed this as hard as we can. We've maxed out every summer window on PSR. We are trying to do the best we can. And my brain is too frazzled to do it now, but he does give a really, almost in layman's terms, explanation of why Sunderland are able to spend appearing to spend so much more than Leeds. He gives Sunderland a bit of credit in the way that they have kind of. I think the word he used was Sunderland like a perfect storm in terms of.
I know what you mean. It's because they basically didn't spend anything in the 2 years prior to coming up. So because we'd come down
operating losses.
Yeah, we were trying to go back up as a Premier League club, and we're actually
with huge losses.
Yeah, we're actually penalised versus them for trying to get straight back up. It's better to do nothing for 2 years and then go up in a flash because you carry no losses. Basically,
that's the point you made. That they've
and then they sold. But then again, they traded very, very well. They sold 2 players upon promotion in Bellingham and the other lad. Made another 40 million quid's worth of.
Yeah, that's exactly the point he made, in that they were just this. Like I say, he almost he found it quite incredible that this club can kind of tick every single box so perfectly to maximise their PSR headroom, and that, like I say, there's been no operating losses. They effectively got promoted on the cheap with a very, very small wage budget, with young players who played very, very well, and they could then sell for tens of millions of pounds. Chuck that in then with the extra Premier League money. They've got a 48,000 seater stadium that's waiting to get filled every week. Again, this is all better worded in the written stuff you can find. But then again, Barry, sorry to jump in. I was just going to say, but then our commercial revenue pisses all over theirs. Yeah, he makes that point as well.
So it's all fine and well saying, "Oh, Sunderland are great," but they sold 2 players. That's good trading.
He's not hiding behind it and saying Sunderland are better than Leeds.
I'm not saying he is, but it's all fine and well giving them as an example. But it's an example because they've done it quite well. I mean, like, the allowable losses in the Championship are not actually that big. It's £13 million per year, so it's not unbridgeable. It's that they happen to sell, on top of having done it basically with almost no squad costs versus ours. They sold 2 players when they came up, which has opened a huge amount of money for them to spend. So sell well as buy well. It's a two-way street.
The problem is they've had players people want to buy, and the players we've needed to sell ever since being relegated have been Rasmus Christensen, Max Verber, Brendan Aronson. No one wants them. No one is buying them.
I was going to say, I know this is the other thing, and I did wonder if they might cite this, or whether it would, I don't know if it'd look a bit churlish or not, but they refer to it as Radz's credit card bill internally. It's been spoken about, basically.
Sins of the past. Which
is different from PSR. We need to say, that's about cash. As much as anything, there is a bit of a PSR hangover from that, from paying for transfers and stuff. Like, we probably would have just gone into this year paying off the last year of Dan James, for example, wouldn't we? It would have been 5 million had we not recontracted him and spread it out. So there's quite a lot that we were carrying with us, but it's about cash, isn't it? About all the fees that were deferred and have become payable. But the talk internally is that things will become a lot better in 12 months' time. The problem is you've got to stay up in order to benefit from it.
I know.
So, it's a car or horse situation, isn't it?
I suppose the argument with like you say, with the sales, which is a really good point, in that Sunderland came up, they traded well, they sold effectively their best players for a lot of money, and it then gave them even more wiggle room than what they had. What do you make of the argument in that Sunderland's squad was far inferior to Leeds', 24 points behind them, and therefore there was less reason for Sunderland to carry some of those players, and that they were vastly inferior to what you need? Whereas, would you see an argument in that there's actually quite a few of Leeds' players that are, again, worth keeping?
Yeah, but I'm thinking of Tanaka, for example, who has got huge...
You probably could have sold him for what Joe Bellingham went for, but do you want to?
Yeah, you've got huge PSR resale value there, but would I want to have seen him gone? Of course not. So I'm prepared to be a hypocrite.
I mean, what's a Sunderland example? Would they have sold Bellingham and got, say, Xhaka and Diarra, effectively? Is that the trade-off? Would you have wanted Tanaka to go in exchange for Xhaka and Diarra?
But again, we're talking about hypotheticals, aren't we? Because the idea of selling out Tanaka makes me go, no, you can't do that. But then again, if you bring in 3 or 4 incredible players, you spend... If you sell him for 20, 25 million, suddenly you're looking at maybe 60, 70, 80 million pounds worth of expenditure over the life of contracts.
It's amortized,
yeah, because of the way it's amortized over the course of the contracts. You're talking about a huge amount of expenditure. Maybe it might have been the better way to do it. Would I advocate for it? Of course not. But it's my right as a football fan to be here.
Of course it is.
I want to keep everybody I like. I want them to sell well the players I don't like.
Yes. Sell Bamford for 40 million.
Yeah, and reinvest it all and buy me more shiny things.
Sunderland have definitely caused a problem here for the way this looks, because everyone just sees it. We've been linked for the same players certainly early in the window. There were a number of names that we were both linked with, and it was, that's a bit much for us. We don't really want to do it.
And Diarra is a great example.
And then they turn up at Sunderland, you're like, oh, right, okay, so they're willing to do it. If you look at Burnley, they've spent quite a bit, but they also lost the core of their team from last year, didn't they? Because Trafford, they lost Brownhill,
Riley.
They have spent a bit, but they had massive gaps to fill just to even get back to where they were last year. And also, some of their spending has included just making permanent, like Jaden Anthony and Fleming and people like that as well.
Yeah.
So they've if Burnley were our only comparison, it wouldn't seem too bad.
It's because what you basically said there is you have to pay out quite a lot just to stand still. And it's actually applicable in part to Leeds because the players that you've already got then get put onto Premier League wages, which obviously eats up some of your budget. The bonuses for going up are about 20 million quid, but it gets put into this year.
Yes.
Because otherwise you would run at a massive loss in the Championship. So they've allowed them to move that into, and it's a standard practice now. So you move the promotion bonuses into your first Premier League year.
That's another point that was made.
Yeah, but it eats up about 20 million quid of your
roughly a 30% wage rise across the squad as well.
So it does eat up. So people are saying, "Where's the money gone?" I think is one of the other questions that emerges from this. But it does get eaten up. To be fair, based on getting promoted is an expensive do. Yeah. So how do we move on from
we play
here?
football now?
Yeah, we probably need a game and a win, don't we? As much as anything.
Yeah.
But it's felt like in that very unique Leeds United way, you can see all the threads coming apart.
There's always a kick in the nuts, isn't there?
Yeah, it does feel like that. But again, it doesn't need to be like that, does it? It feels like we're so prone to shooting ourselves in the foot. But whether that's in terms of narrative and messaging, and even like that, going back 12 months and that messaging around Solomon being antagonistic in the way that it was phrased. And I don't know who wrote that.
No.
But it's aged really, really badly because they came across as really sensitive to fans being hysterical about transfers, which, surprise, we're going to be every window because that's just what it's like.
Although if we're maxed out, at least we don't need to worry about January.
Well, that's the other thing, isn't it?
Nice and calm. Well, nothing going on.
Well, if they're on the record as saying that, then does that scupper January?
Well, I mean, then I suppose again, there's no more headroom to play with, is there? Then you are in the case of if you want to bring players in, you are going to need to sell, and maybe that's where you say, is it mortgaging the future, or you sort of basically go into January again? Hypothetically, you spend, January's a horrible market, 20, 30 million on a striker that you need.
All right, steady on, Angus. But if you don't buy him in January, as we know, you can then reinvest it on a striker in the summer.
Or let's get the striker that keeps them up. Yeah. And then as a Premier League club, you can sell from a position of strength before the June 30th deadline.
We'll be on the phone to Villa asking if the loan is Buendia.
Buendia again.
That's all got a bit baby reindeer, hasn't it?
It does feel like it's kind of the new Ryan Kent, isn't he?
Yeah.
Just one of those names that you have
never
to see.
Goes away.
You have to see every window and you're like, oh, God.
Can we just sign him so he can stop being linked with him?
The funny thing is with Harry Wilson and the collapse of that, if a month ago you'd have said to Leeds fans, you're getting Harry Wilson, they'd have been like, okay, is there not anyone better? Whereas yesterday when it collapsed, it somehow managed to feel a little bit like the end of the world.
Everyone woken up not having any idea they were going to be interested in Harry Wilson that day, and suddenly it's like, we need Harry Wilson. Yeah. Bring him in. To be fair, we need dead ball specialism. I mean, that hurt a bit, knowing that they're coming out of the window without a proper dead ball specialist, although again, they keep going on about how Stack is such a good set piece taker.
Get him on the end of them.
Yeah, that's my point. There's some grim irony in that you've got your tallest outfield player on set pieces.
If we have to endure Jack Harrison and Brendy whispering behind their hands and hitting the first man, at least make us believe that Stack might get on the end of one of them once in the middle.
Yeah, it does seem a bit of a failing to have not thought about this. If we're going to go for the more physical,
but does it not feel like they have thought about it though?
They just haven't executed
it. Yeah. It's just not been done properly.
And poor old Joe Rothwell's rotting up in Scotland, having the most miserable time imaginable.
Yeah. I suppose let's try and finish on something a bit more uplifting, because there are positives to take out of the window. Like I said, I think the strategy, and there clearly is a strategy in play. I don't feel like it's been fully executed, but there is sense within it, I think. I even see the sense in Calvert-Lewin. I also understand, given their track record with the injuries, and like Solomon, for example, last year, that they could nurse Calvert-Lewin through it. But then again, we saw that loads of times with Pat Bamford, who kept breaking down as well. So it kind of swings both ways, doesn't it? It's hard to know, because as soon as that one injury comes around, people will be furious again.
Absolutely.
The fact Okafor was injured against Sheffield Wednesday, straight away, everyone went, brilliant. Yeah. Brilliant. That's this season over with. He was on the bench for the next game, as it turned out. But yeah, it's ended up well, like, and Perry as well, when he concedes 5, doesn't save anything. People are like, you can't he basically can't ever stop a ball.
Everyone's got the knee-jerk reaction, haven't they? Because it's still just finished August, but we're still forming our opinions, aren't we? Yeah. And so every result carries such massive significance that we really overanalyze every result.
You just sat in, I mean, I spoke to Robbie at the weekend, and you just sat in the room with them for a couple of hours. And some of the language that's getting bandied around is like 49ers, arrogant, ignorant, naive, stuff like that. Do you think that any of those things, or is it just a strategy that's not quite gone to plan?
Yeah, I think 49ers is quite strong, calling them frauds. I mean, I think up to now...
playing words, though.
It's very
Let's give him some credit.
Yeah, again, from my own personal opinion, I think as owners, I don't think they put too many feet wrong. I think, again, I want to hide behind the fact that we need to see how this season plays out and what happens with Farke, because evidently there was definite internal debate in the summer, which is every club should do. There was debate about what they do with Farke and whether he proves to be the man that can keep them in the Premier League next season. And again, time will tell. It's a horrible cliche, but we have to say it. So the stadium stuff, I mean, that's not hit any hitches yet, where I don't think anyone's been given any reason to believe that the stadium stuff is a hollow promise or is going to be something that they don't execute on. That's ticking over. I think that should probably pick up pace again now the window's closed, and need to revisit the timelines on that. And in terms of investment, again, the accounts on Companies House will show, in time, whether they were lying about maxing out. But based on what they've said, they've maxed out every summer window up to now. I would argue that regardless of the timing of Solomon and stuff, but I think the two prior summer windows, I think they did a lot of sensible deals. Bogle is turning into an absolute revelation. So I think that there's been enough there in the windows. Promotion took a year longer than they wanted, but get to the playoff final, probably get to 110 points if Melier doesn't make the mistakes he makes last season. So yeah, I think it's harsh to call them 49ers at this point.
Just on because Robbie Evans has said he's not the football man, and then we've got Underwood in there who is pretty inexperienced as well. Who else in the football club is a football person? Because I'm just thinking back there to when Farke joined, and Parag was definitely saying, we don't see this as a championship appointment. We believe he can do a job in the Premier League. Then we actually get to the Premier League, and clearly there's a bit of internal inquiry about this.
Well, Underwood certainly, I don't know if, I'm assuming he played the game, but obviously not to the level that any of us consider him a player. But he's clearly come from an administrative academy background and suitably impressed enough people at Leeds to rise through the ranks. We ran a piece on him in May or June time where we spoke to people like Skubala, Mark Jackson, people that have worked with him directly in the past. They all sang his praises and said that there have been over previous years Premier League clubs sniffing around him. Now, I would imagine that's not for recruitment roles. I'd imagine they're looking at him for similar academy roles. Or
there was talk that Kinnear wanted to take him to Everton.
That was reflected in our piece as well. That if Kinnear could, he would have taken him. I don't know what contractual blocks were put in on Kinnear to stop him doing that, but I know Kinnear liked him and admired him. And I think 12 months ago, Nick Hammond had, whilst he was still on the books, was saying to the 49ers, Underwood is a future sporting director and somebody that should be nurtured, and did work closely with Hammond over the course of last season when Hammond was sort of on the way out. So he's probably who Parag would consider the most senior football person. Alex Davis, again, come from a scouting and analysis background. He's been there a long, long time. I mean, you'll have listeners that will have probably heard his name on the grapevine for more than a decade. And again, he is apparently somebody that has impressed Marathi over sort of in that first championship season when Marathi was still getting his feet under the table and trying to surround himself with as many voices as possible, like Steinson, people like that. But ultimately, it sounded like Davis really stood out, and is why he's then been promoted to head of recruitment. So you've got Underwood and Davis, and of course, Farke is a very, very senior football voice with Evans on the data side.
I suppose the fear is that they've impressed someone, though, who doesn't know anything about football, and maybe the line for that isn't as high as people would hope, and that you don't know, because I've no idea who any of these people are particularly. I've never spoken to any of them. I've no idea of their actual abilities, but if the people at the top don't really understand the sport, it does make you wonder how well positioned they are to judge the abilities of the people who do need to understand it.
Basically, what credentials does Parag have to hire a sporting director?
Exactly.
And like you say, we're not party to the conversations. Again, the way it was spell out for me, again, we're speaking with various people, was that, again, the opinions of people like Nick Hammond are important. Hammond is a very, very experienced trader in terms of in football. Angus, very experienced football administrator. Underwood is highly rated within the game. And Parag, I'm sure, will have listened to those various opinions. Ultimately, again, if this season is a failure, we're all going to look at Prague and say, why on earth did you hire these brand new people who clearly had very, very successful careers to get to where they are, but you've put so much faith and responsibility in their hands, relatively inexperienced hands, and it hasn't worked. But time will tell on that, whether they are to answer for this.
Because I suppose this is the season, just to sum things up, this is the season when it needs to count. This, in many ways, is their first, not their first test, but it's their biggest, most prominent test of their credentials in relation to the baseline where Leeds United and its fan base expects and hopes to be, which is in the Premier League. You need to deliver at Premier League level. It felt like we all understood you kind of have to do what it takes and work within the sort of the shit show of the Championship to get out of it and its parameters and the weirdness of the transfer market, trying to get players to come and play there. Fine. All in the past now. This is the one where you need to deliver. And it feels like there have been a number of factors that have instilled a lot of understandable doubt in people this summer.
I think that is fair. I think at this stage, when we're 3 games in, that doubt is there to be proved wrong and to be put right. And I think 4 points from 9 games is a very, very good start. I'm sure we haven't even discussed the games, but I mean, it's been a very, very encouraging start with low XG and 1 penalty. But again, we're gonna have to see that they have not added in attack, as I think any of us think they should have done. There's going to be a lot of burden on Metcher, Calvert-Lewin's shoulders. I mean, even Pirou. I mean, you and I discussed it on WhatsApp on Saturday. Saturday was a bad day for Pirou because Metcher and Calvert-Lewin made the system work, and it looks like that's what the 9 needs to be for Leeds to get ahead in this division. So
a bit of a scrapper.
Yeah, a fighter basically. And I'm again, Pirou want to prove people wrong, and it's not a bad option to have. The Championship Golden Boot winner. But no, yeah, the doubt will be there until it isn't. Until they are safe from relegation, people are going to point fingers, especially when the injuries start happening, and some people start dropping like flies.
My hope on the low XG and everything is that we have had 3 pretty tough games to start, and most teams will go to Arsenal and not score.
Absolutely.
And I know Everton had a bit of Newcastle both had some selection issues, but both good teams. And in Moyes, a very experienced operator, came without much ambition, it felt like. So he looked like he was coming for a clean sheet. Mm-hmm. So maybe it's understandable that we're not creating a huge
it's early in the season, isn't it? I mean, they've had 3 games. They are surely, by simple passing of time, going to become more cohesive and better as a unit with more time together.
So you'll see with Perry, like you expect Perry's kicking. When the coaches get there, the goalkeeping coach gets their hands on him, will improve just the cohesiveness. He's not going to panic as much when the ball comes to his feet because he'll know where his fullback is and the centre-backs and whether it's just time to go long. And you saw improvements in that between Arsenal and Newcastle.
Completely.
It just felt like a simpler game for him.
Between Hillsborough and the Newcastle game.
Ball came to him because he had the option up front. I can kick it long, and it all felt just a little bit more comfortable. And that's one of the things I mentioned on the match ball in the wake of the Newcastle game. One thing that does give me comfort is that we understand that game shows, and all the games have shown, how hard it is to score in the Premier League and how hard it is to win in the Premier League. So even though XG might be relatively low, I think we've performed quite well. And that you touched on the right word there, Michael, before. Hope. There is still hope that we do have enough, even if I know it goes counter to what Farke said, but there were probably politics involved in what Farke said as well in relation to his own job. But I don't know. I've got a bit of quiet optimism that I've had since the start of the season that we've got enough. Remains to be seen. We will see as the season unfolds, but I've seen plenty of encouraging signs that make me hope that despite the failings of the latter part of the window, and I think they have to be marked down as very, very clear failings at this stage, hopefully they're not too costly because we have got a talented squad and we can create chances, and we did have the chance to win that game against Newcastle.
We haven't seen it yet either, have we, with the team? Because I wouldn't be at all surprised if given a month we end up with Okafor and Calvert-Lewin in the front 3. And maybe James, maybe Nonso sticks on the right. I don't know exactly what would end up happening there, but it's quite a change from what we've seen so far. So there's definitely a chance for this still to work.
It doesn't help, does it, when you get that sense of kind of they're assembling the plane in midair, and this is with the window rolling a month into the season or whatever it is, or 3 or 4 games. It destabilizes everything because you're trying to weigh up the evidence of your eyes and your ears with what you see on the field and the reality of the football versus what you're still trying to do in the market and the PSR stuff. It's a shame because it's a lot.
I've actually really loved both of the games at Ellen Road.
Yeah.
Like I've had a really good time at both games, and I thought this is a great atmosphere. We've played pretty well. Admittedly, neither of them good football matches to watch, I dare say, as a neutral, but I've really enjoyed being at them. So I just kind of hope it's enough, because if it's, as soon as it becomes apparent it's not enough, I know that's not how it's going to feel in there.
Yeah. Oh, well, the person who stands to win greatest and lose biggest in this is Daniel Farker. Because if he can get this side singing and get us, the required points and steer us away from that bottom throng of teams in the coming weeks, he's going to look great, isn't he?
I think people are desperate for him to succeed. I think people want to believe that those 190 points are off the back of a very, very good manager that was behind a lot of good things, and people don't want to just think it was done by sheer brute force and by sheer money spent on the squad and sort of the overhang from the Premier League years and the players that were left in the squad. I think people want to believe that they've got a very, very good manager. And yeah, there are still a lot of question marks, and he certainly has provoked doubt at times. But Leeds have been competitive, haven't they? In those 2 home games, wasn't it just reassuring to see them being competitive? Because I know as going in, as I was in the Everton game, you just please at least make a fist of it. Don't just get drubbed and everybody, talking about hope, just keep the hope going. And if you can keep it going for enough months, before you know it, they might be in a strong position.
And actually, that's something you've hit upon a truth there, Beren. I think that in the Championship, we were the haves and there were loads of have-nots. The shoe is now on the other foot.
Yeah, underdogs most weeks.
It's completely changed the dynamic. And yet we've made a decent fist of it so far. Again, limited evidence. There's plenty of time for it to go wrong, but there's also plenty of time for it to go right as well.
We have to hope. If we haven't got hope, what are we playing at?
No, I know.
4 points from 9.
Yeah.
Still ahead of Man City in the table?
Yeah, where we will stay.
Yeah.
Ready for that January window to pounce on something.
At a free transfer. Actually, that's one thing to touch on, actually, before, because I've seen a lot of chat about this online as well. We can still sign free agents. Did they give any indication whether or not that's a market they would consider?
And when will they unveil Josh Brownhill?
It sounded like not. It sounded, it was raised. Again, can't remember if it was on or off the record, but it was mentioned, and it seems like they just don't feel what would justify them doing it is out there. Basically, the options aren't good enough, I think.
Right.
I think back to the Phil Hay tweet.
What? Some see on a free?
Yeah. That's iconic.
Some see on a free might not have much of an impact, however it was that he said.
I miss Phil.
But, it was, if it's Ericsson or someone, I guess, maybe it'd be a bit more of an impact than someone we may have got at that point. But
yeah, I mean, Brownhill, set pieces, goals, but what do I know? I'm not a sporting director. I'm not a managing director of Leeds United, am I? Thankfully, I've just sat here talking bollocks about it, and we'll continue to do that in the coming weeks. Thank you, Beren, for that extended debrief on it. And I think we're all going to go. Are we going to go home and just stare at the wall, dark and droop, something like that for a bit?
Well, hopefully you're all enjoying the Athletic subscription and reading today's pieces from Leeds United.
Oh, I can't wait to read it, which I probably will have done by the time this is out. We'll see you in a bit.
The Square Ball Podcast.